Welcome back to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, author of Click Here When I Die and the founder of The Legacy Vault by My Life and Wishes. Today, we're diving into the world where tax law, business law, and estate planning collide in both Pennsylvania and in Southwest Florida. My guest is someone who brings a rare dual state perspective and more than 3 decades of legal experience. Attorney Ken Ventresca earned his degree in industrial management from Carnegie Mellon University, his JD from the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and he's admitted to practice in both Pennsylvania and Florida. Now, Ken's areas of expertise include taxation, mergers and acquisition, business formation, estate planning, probate and estate administration, and yes, the entire alphabet soup of tax returns: individual, corporate, partnership, fiduciary, estate and gift, charitable, and many more. He even handles filings for HOAs and nonprofits. He's a member of the Allegheny County Bar Association, the Florida Bar Association, the Collier County Bar Association, the Estate Planning Council of Naples, the United States District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania, and the U.S. Tax Code. Ken lectures frequently on estate planning, taxation, and mergers and acquisitions. And today, he's here to share some of the stories, insights, and avoidable nightmares that he's witnessed throughout his career. So if you work with families, business owners, retirees who are heading to Florida or in Pennsylvania, or anyone simply planning their legacy, this episode is packed with gold. So let's get into it. Ken, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Happy to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, we met each other month and a half ago, I guess, or so, and you've got some interesting stories. So I'm excited to share some of those with our audience. But before I jump into that, between your work in Pennsylvania and Southwest Florida and the sheer variety of clients that you've helped throughout the years, the stories that you shared with me and that you're bringing today, some of those are truly unforgettable and perfect examples of what not to do. So before we dive in, give us a quick snapshot of your background. I mean, Carnegie Mellon, Pitt Law, decades in taxation, business, and estate planning. Now, multi-state practice between Pennsylvania and the Southwest Florida, Naples, Fort Myers. How did this blend of tax, business, and estate work shape the kind of clients that you attract?
I think a lot of it has to do with the type of client that I began to represent early in my career. I started basically on the tax side. When I was in law school trying to rub two nickels together, I got a job with a firm, Coopers and Lybrand, who now is PricewaterhouseCoopers, now a Big Four accounting firm. Well, they came to our law school and they hired people for the busy season that year. It was 1991. And while Whitney Houston was belting her national anthem out at the Super Bowl that day, that day, I was first learning to prepare tax returns at Coopers and Lybrand at their offices. So that's where it started. And when I decided to go out on my own, that's what I would do during the busy season to kind of, while I first hung my shingle out before I got super busy, I began to prepare tax returns, lots of them. And I had great training. People worked for were fantastic. And so as a result, a lot of the work, a lot of my practice developed from there. And people would say, well, gee, you did my tax return. Can you do my will? And God forbid, when somebody would pass, we would handle their estate. And then, well, now you do our tax return. Can you handle our business? And then the business tax return. So again, it evolved into a practice of estate planning, estate administration, and small business, because a lot of my clients are business owners as well. So that's how it came to be. And a lot of what we were talking about offline were just some of the things. What's attracted me to your company is it is a solution for something I see on a daily basis in my practice, which I guess a few words is this: simply lack of organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all say we need to get organized, but actually getting organized is a little bit different. So So let's talk about that. Let's start with the one that really blew me away. You call it the art collector. So you mentioned to me you had a client whose home looked like an actual museum. I mean, paintings, sculptures, rare objects, an incredible collection. But when he passed, what happened?
Well, he was very passionate about his collections. They were meticulously hung, for lack of a better word, the paintings, the displayed, there were bronzes, there were all different types of art objects, and they were lovingly, I guess, curated would be the term. It was like a museum, but it was a private residence. And the problem was that, God forbid, when he passed, there was no inventory of what we had, no purchase data of what we had. Here's how much he paid for this, or here's how much he paid for that, or the idea of what gallery he might have bought it from, or somebody that could perhaps even testify to its provenance in terms of where it came from, and information that would have been very, very helpful in cataloging the entire collection. Because when somebody dies, one of the main things we have to do is we have to inventory what their possessions are. So if it's artwork, we've got to do an inventory of the artwork. What is it? And then how much it's worth. What was it worth at date of death? That can be a rather tricky thing to figure out if one is not an expert on art. So we had to, go out there sort of like flashlight and, in hand and lantern, and trying to find people that could assist us with inventorying and cataloging this collection. That would have been made a lot easier had there been such an inventory put together prior to his death.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But zero documentation, no inventory, no description, no receipts, no record of where they even came from. So for your team, it's kind of like a scavenger hunt on steroids. Am I right?
Absolutely. And you're at a point where you're not, you come into something with somebody was very passionate about, but an area like this, unless you possess those specialized knowledge in that area, you're really left at a disadvantage right out of the gate. So yeah, you're one thing about we went through, your particular website, and that's what I like about it. It forces people really, if they're going to do it, to, gives them the ability to actually organize and upload inventories, receipts, anything that they want that they feel relevant and germane to what it is they're attempting to organize.
Thank you for saying so. Yeah, it certainly is, one secure place for everything, which saves families enormous amount of time and then obviously money because they're not having to, hire the firms to track this stuff down. But what a powerful example of a lifetime of acquiring, but no plan for passing it on. Right? Wow.
Absolutely, and you see that, and not even with stuff. I think there was another example I talked to you about earlier was a lady with all the security certificates. She was an older lady. I met her. She was in her mid 80s, but up to her early 90s, she was still vital in terms of handling her investments, and she had a very, very diverse portfolio, but had a lot of the things in certificated form. So, that became interesting in terms of attempting to locate all these certificates.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The investor and, sophisticated, savvy, and successful, right? But she loved possessing all those actual physical certificates. But if you're keeping them in different files, drawers, boxes, maybe strong box, or even in a safe deposit box, right? It makes discovering those things very, very difficult for those that she left. And I love that story too because it's so common. Maybe not strong boxes everywhere, but the part where family is assume, oh, they'll know where everything is, or someone will figure it out, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't. A lot of times people either have the conversation, they'll leave a roadmap, but a lot of times that changes. They may move, they may clean stuff out, stuff gets shifted, maybe not from its original location. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's If the documents that people do, I try to tell them what I do them. This is a half of it. This is half of you planning your estate. You're getting the documents in place, about half of it. The other chunk of it is getting the assets retitled properly so that the beneficiary designations are correct, the ownership is correct, which then presupposes that we know what all the items are that we're trying to retitle, that we've got our arms around all the property. We have a full inventory of all that we have and all that we owe.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the work that you do, and I love estate planning attorneys. I mean, you work with families to preserve assets, transfer wealth, and keep families out of court. But the client, the individual, still has to make sure family knows where to find it, because a good estate plan is only as good as if they know where the original documentation is and who the attorney is that drafted that, right? So
Absolutely.
Another story you mentioned to me this morning, actually, the big game hunter. And you told me this story, and I read the email you sent twice. So you were telling me about a gentleman who had enough taxidermy mounts to fill two rooms the size of tennis courts. Can you talk a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Yeah, it was it just hunted all over the world, and basically took back these I guess trophies. And there's a process. I'm not very familiar, but the taxidermy process, you convert these animals into mounts, into stuffed mounts, and they're expensive. It's a very expensive process to go through, but these were like museum quality. Who we ultimately ended up giving most of them to were museums. So, but the thing is, it's without a roadmap, it's difficult in terms of what to do, who to contact. There's, all kinds of issues with things like this in terms of, there's federal laws that are at play in terms of transportation of these items. So again, just having, again, well, one of my clients also, a different person, was a big gun collector and collected all kinds of firearms. But and I had talked to him before he passed. And one thing that he did do, he cataloged all his firearms, and he actually, met with a federal firearms licensed, dealer, so that it was very clear what it needed to be done for each of the weapons. He was going to leave one weapon to somebody in another state, and in order to do that, he had the whole thing worked out. And that's so helpful because it at least gives us, as the people that have to quote unquote pick up the pieces, it gives us a roadmap of breadcrumbs to say, okay, we should call this person. He's a federal firearms dealer. He's going to help us get these weapons retitled in a correct and proper manner. And he gave us, ways in which how these weapons are valued and what their value was and when they were purchased and all the receipts. And that really helps out in terms of having an organized disposition of the assets.
Yeah, and quite in stark contrast from our art collector, our gun collector at least cataloged everything, inventory, took steps. One thing I've always been curious about, and I don't know enough about it, I am uh, uh, a firearm owner. I enjoy shooting handguns, but don't have any massive collection. But I've heard about gun trust. What does a gun trust do versus if I die and I've got five or six handguns?
I mean, a gun trust is like any other trust in that it is a way. It's almost like a beneficiary designation attached to the gun. In other words, these guns are in this trust. They're governed by a trust document, which is a written document that says, in essence, how they're going to be handled and treated while I'm alive as the owner, and then upon my passing, how they're going to be disposed. And yeah, that's a nice way to systematically dispose of firearms. It avoids the probate process, which in some states, in particular in Florida, can be somewhat lengthy and tricky. But what it also does is it forces the person doing the gun trust to do a lot of this homework up front in terms of whether there are any particular restrictions or conditions precedent to the transfer of a firearm, especially across state lines.
Yeah, and I live in Arizona. You're in Florida. They're gun-friendly kind of states, but I can imagine for people in California and Illinois, which are terrible for those kind of things. But the other thing I think it does too, much like with the art, or much like with uh, the game, the
Mhm.
taxidermy mounts, and even the guns. Families fight over things, right? And even if there's nothing's been spelled out, mom promised the china to both the girls, and they are going to fight over it. And so, having this stuff documented and then really specifying who you wish this item to go to and this, hopefully, makes family fight a little less. Still going to fight.
It is. It's another recitation of somebody's intent. People could put something in a document till they're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, when they've uploaded receipts and they've uploaded a picture, and this is to go to such and such, it's clear. It becomes even clearer, I think, to people. The more detail, the better. Especially on items like you say, stuff. People fight over stuff. People fight over money, but people first fight over stuff. Stuff they equate with love or the lack thereof. It's sentimental. And it's caused me, I think, the greatest consternation in administering estates has been dealing with items of tangible personal property that have either been promised to one person, but the other person feels they have a better right to them. So to get that nailed down as much as, and sometimes people just do it through a memorandum that lays everything out and says, look, of all my items of property, I'm going to lay them out. Here's who I want the item to go to right next to the item's name. And yeah, that goes a long way toward making things simpler to administer.
Yeah, that personal property memorandum is just a invaluable document because so my kids, they all fought when they grew up, and the last thing we as parents want is for our kids to be fighting over our stuff after we're gone. And the only way we can really avoid that is if we actually spell it out, like you say.
I had a lady, she was not, actually, it was a gentleman who died. His wife died before him, and he was in his 80s when he died. But I represented his daughter and her husband. So they came to me and they said, gee, dad died, and, dad didn't have a lot of assets, but he had one of the things he had mom's diamond ring. Now, they were married, I think, I don't know, maybe in the 30s or the 40s. The diamond ring was a small ring. It had just basically two diamond chips in it. It wasn't like one central stone. I think we had it appraised. It was appraised out like $200. It wasn't a very expensive ring. And dad had other assets, totaling, well over a few $100,000. But the siblings didn't fight over the money. They were fighting, two of them were fighting over this ring. So much so that at the end of the day, we ended up having to cut the ring in half. We gave half to each. Now, there was no tangible personal property memo in this situation. It was just simply a will that said, I leave all my property to my children, share and share alike. Easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Now I have to ask. So there's this ring, and it's not very large. It's worth $200. At the end of the day, it got split in half, and each got half. How much money did they spend in fees having
There,
that
there was
discussion?
to mediate the discussion. They came in here. They spent over 2.5 hours with me at my hourly rate. So we could have bought several of those rings in the time it took just to have a discussion about it. And the thing is, everybody walked away. Everybody was upset and angry. It wasn't even like the discussion was very productive. And out of that discussion came the Solomonic solution of quite literally cutting the ring in half.
Wow. Again, you know, everyone listening, remember, they're going to fight over stuff and they're going to spend maybe more money tenfold than the item's actually worth. So think it through and document it. The other one that we talked about, and it's probably the most common one, at least I've seen. I experienced it, and I'll chat about that in a bit. But the last scenario, again, probably the most common and also the most damaging, is the inability to locate the original will. So, can you speak to this, Ken? Because people hear missing will and assume it's just an annoyance, but the reality is it can completely alter the whole distribution of an estate. What have you seen happen with that?
Well, one thing, especially now, nobody deals in original documents now. Everybody, I guess, based on our culture, based on who we are as a people, it's gotten to the point people send you a scan or they'll take a picture with their phone. I've got to beg people to send me back wet ink signature original documents, just because they're not really required much anymore in most aspects of life. However, they are still required, very much so, in terms of estate planning, especially in the preparation and execution of a will, power of attorney, a medical power of attorney. Originals are very crucially important. And I think people, as a result of just living in the society we live in, where originals in most areas are not very important, sometimes proper care is not taken of the original to custody it, to actually put it in a place where it's safe, where we won't lose it, we won't forget about it. So when somebody passes, I think I would say on 3 out of every 4 estates that I don't custody the document, because I recommend to clients, you're welcome to keep your original documents at my law firm. There will be no charge. You want them, you can have them the same day you stop by, or we'll mail them to you. We do it just that we don't lose documents. We keep them in a vault. The vault is waterproof, it's fireproof, and as a result, it keeps the documents safe. Because a lot of times when people take their documents with them, they'll stuff them in a strong box or somewhere. They'll move. Something happens, and the document's lost. And they say, "Well, wait a minute, though. I got a copy of it right here." That's hard. Probating a copy of a document is very difficult because the court asks the question. It says, "Well, what happened to the original? Was the original revoked? Was it to revoke a will, by the way? You know how you revoke a will? Real easy way to revoke a will? You tear it in half, you shred it, you burn it. Those are methods of revocation of a will, which is why maybe the original doesn't exist. So if you don't have the original documents, it's a heavy lift to try to get a copy put into the probate to actually get it to the point where it's recognized. So the original is critical. And a lot of times too is people can't find the original, but the current original, say they did an original will last year, they can't find, but they did one 5 years ago. They found that original. Now that original is your document now. Maybe that doesn't say what you want it to say, at least the deceased. Maybe the deceased made changes for a reason. Those changes now, largely, if we can't find the new original, we're going to have a difficult time getting the copy of the new will probated over the original of the prior will. So it's critically important to keep custody of your documents, keep custody of the originals, and to have a copy of the most current document readily available. So, for example, if somebody needs to refer to it, or God forbid at the time of death, okay, this is the copy of the original document with a little notation on it. The original is stored here. Every estate plan I prepare, I hand clients the copy that want me to hold the originals, but stamped in ink right on the copy is the original of this document is located at, it's my law firm's address and phone number.
I love that. We tell people all the time to, keep a digital copy of your will or your trust documents in your legacy vault. But in there, there's a clear space, and it's a required field where you need to tell family where the originals are. In your case, they're at Attorney Ventresca's office, and family will be able to find that. Because in our scenario, when my father-in-law passed, we had the task of going through everything in his home office. And again, as you imagine, an 80-year-old man who's been 45 years in the same house, who, in my interpretation, never threw a thing away. We're talking boxes and file drawers, right? And so we're trying to find things, insurance policies and everything else. Is there a will? Find it, no records. So 2 weeks into the process, I said to Michelle, my wife, I said, "Hey, honey, I've got good news. I've got bad news." She said, "What's the good news?" I said, "The good news is I found the will." "What's the bad news?" I said, "The bad news is apparently you have to move to Milwaukee and live with Aunt Jean and Uncle Ed." So we found the will, and it's one thing to find it, right? But the other thing is with your will, your trust, the reason you want to keep it close, make sure you know where to find it, is because you should be periodically reviewing it, because we were well into our 50s. And I think it would have made a great, Adam Sandler movie or something where someone dies and, the 50-year-old has to go cross country and live with their aunt and uncle because that's what the will said. Oh, man. Those are great stories. You know, again, this is why planners and frankly everyone listening should take all this seriously. It's one of the simplest things to avoid, but it can be one of the costliest things, if you don't. Um, so when you look across all four stories, our art collector, our big game hunter, the investor, the missing will, there's one overarching theme, right? It's that legal documents were not the problem, organization was. So, and I think that's where tools, and thank you for mentioning it, like the Legacy Vault, become priceless, because centralizing instructions, inventories, documents, and wishes, so family doesn't have to spend months or years trying to assemble, somebody's life. Um, so you work with a huge number of snowbirds and dual state residents. Have you seen any like nightmares when someone has assets in both, say, Pennsylvania and Florida, or hasn't updated their residency or titling, or estate documents properly?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest things I see too is if you're a resident of Pennsylvania, you're a domiciliary of Pennsylvania, if it's considered where you work or where you live, where your primary home is, you are subject to what's called a Pennsylvania inheritance tax, which is a state level death tax on your assets at passing. Versus if you're a Florida domiciliary, meaning Florida is considered to be your main home, there is no inheritance tax in the state of Florida. So what I see a lot of times too, and it's just a matter of organization, people will spend a great deal of their time in Florida. I ran across somebody the other day. They spend 9 months a year in the state of Florida. I'm like, well, have you gone? Have you filed as a resident in Florida? There's a document you file with the tax department to basically declare your residence in Florida. No, I have not done that. So yeah, there's a lot of cross-state issues that if people do live in both places, from starting with just declaring a residency, whether it's Florida or whether it's Pennsylvania, all the way out to where their documents are prepared. A lot of times they'll take up residence in Florida, but they'll have a set of Pennsylvania documents, which necessarily may or may not work completely in the state of Florida. Powers of attorney sometimes are from different states. So a lot of times too, if you are a multi-state resident, that thought's got to be given to, where is it that you really are considered a domiciliary of, and do your documents reflect that?
Great advice. Great advice. All right. Well, Ken, this has been great. I've got two final questions. So, the first one, what's one thing that you wish every family understood about estate planning that would save them hours or even years of stress?
I wish every family would actually go through the process of whoever it is, if it's me, and this is what I've actually done in my own personal life. My wife has always been on me because my wife doesn't deal in this sort of an area very much. I mean, she's an attorney, but she deals in a completely different area of the law. So she said, "Geez, if something happens to you and I'm around, well, what do I do?" So what I did was, I, lack of a better way to put it, yours is much more comprehensive than mine, but I did what was called the death list. And I sat down in a cold, I live in Pittsburgh primarily, so we have very cold winters up here. So on a cold, icy day, I sat down and I went through and I drew my death list up. And it was granular because what I said was, okay, I'm not here anymore. What would if I could leave something for somebody, what would I want to tell them? Real stupid stuff like garbage goes on Thursday nights. leave the cans 6 inches, 8 inches apart, or they won't take them. All the way down to here are all the passwords. Um, the passwords make me just want to go back to a time when there were no passwords because getting into a deceased person's account can be very, very difficult. Having a list of current passwords and login IDs is absolutely critical. And that went on my death list, all of my passwords, who to call. In other words, call our financial advisor, call our life insurance agent, call this person, call that person, call the bar because I'm a lawyer. I have certain license requirements that need to be met, God forbid, if I pass. All of the things that I could think of that if I were around and able to do, I would tell somebody else to do. Because when you start thinking out in that level of detail, it generates questions and gaps. And that would be my best advice to anybody because you've already identified now all of the stumbling blocks. And now you could just simply write them down, keep it in a safe place like your vault, and rest assured that those instructions will be followed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's how the Legacy Vault came into being. When we were going through what we were going through, and most nights Michelle was up the street at her folks' house going through things, and she'd be coming home telling me about this and that and the other thing. And I, much like you, except I was a little different. I sat out by my pool. I was in Wisconsin. It was in September, and I had an adult beverage of my choice in my one hand, and my other bad habit is I do enjoy a good cigar upon occasion. And I just started writing everything. If I didn't make it home tomorrow, what do my family need to know? Who my attorney is, who's my accountant, who's my financial advisor, the insurance agent, where I bank, types of bank accounts. Do you have a will? Yes. Where is it located? And just on and on and on and on. And then ultimately, I decided that it needed to be, a digital format so that changes can be made easily from anywhere I am and go forward. But yeah, great advice. The other thing, what's just as a follow up to that, what's the biggest myth that you wish people would stop believing about estate plan?
People are obsessed with quote unquote avoiding probate. Now, I have two licenses. The state of Pennsylvania, probate is not a very onerous system at all. Avoiding probate is not really something that I would put as, in my opinion, as something that should be right at the top of your list for estate planning. Probate's just a system by which the will gets filed and there's a orderly distribution of your assets. Florida has a little bit more of a comprehensive system, but even that, it's not something I would put at the very top of my list. People seem they're almost paralyzed by it in the sense of a lot of people come to me, well, I want to avoid probate. Well, no. We'll talk about that. The bigger issue though is that let's discuss getting what it is you have to who you want to get it when you've passed. Whether we go through probate or not is but one of many issues we could discuss. That's not the beat all end all. The beat all end all is here's what I have, here's where I want it to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when I first started this business and really started learning a lot about estate planning, uh, 11, 12 years ago now, um, I think what I hear a lot of people say is, well, estate, you know, that's like for wealthy people. And, I always argue, I say, estate is just a really fancy word for stuff. And y'all have stuff. So, like you said, make sure you know what it is, where it is, and who wants to get it. But hey, Ken, this has been outstanding, man. I really appreciate you, my friend, for coming on and sharing a few stories with us today. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you for having me. It's very kind of you to ask me on your show, and yeah, I look forward to talking further with you about this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And hey, for anyone listening, I will have all of Ken's contact information below in the show notes. So you can contact him with any questions that you might have. Again, if you are in Pennsylvania, the greater Pittsburgh area, if you're in Southwest Florida, in that area, have questions, absolutely reach out to Ken. And remember, estate planning isn't just legal documents. Estate planning is clarity. Estate planning is organization. Estate planning is making things easier for those that you love. We'll see you all again next time on the next episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and how to avoid them. Now, make it a great day.